Welcome to Boating Insights. This is a podcast about achieving your boating dreams, brought to you by Above and Beyond Boating. We deliver the leading courses to skipper your own boat. Hello, welcome back. I'm Neil Driscoll, and today I'm going to be talking to you about provisioning and food on board. I have an interest in food. I've grown up in and around catering companies. My mum had one, my best friend's family had one, and my wife's family had restaurants. So the food, aside from being a man that loves my food, has always been something I've found interesting on boats. It's also, over the different years I've been on various boats, a well-run galley can make a huge difference to the happiness and the morale and the energy on board. Now, before we get into the actual food, I am going to get into the presentation. Obviously, with all food, presentation is key, and that's why I'd strongly suggest for you heading out to sea that you think about getting some new, not used, dog bowls. The great thing with dog bowls is they stack well, they're very sturdy, they've got an outer rim, so even if something's quite hot, you can be holding on to it. They don't slide around, and they're quite deep. Well, I mean, obviously you could just keep filling them up, but they're at least not just going to spill straight away. So, and of course they're hard wearing and they're cheap. So think about dog bowls for going to sea. I thought the first person that told me this was crazy, and now I honestly wouldn't consider doing an offshore trip without them. Outside of that, then what I wanted to lead into is just running through a few things. So you got snacks, hydration, preparation, refrigeration, and then implementation. So let's rip into it. So your snacks. Remember, when you're doing trips, often if you just look at the psychology of it for a minute, people tend to just go for something that's easy when they're tired, just like we do at home. So if you can make it easier for people to eat more healthily, so for example, grab one of your dog bowls, chop up a few oranges, pass it up on deck, everyone will just start getting the vitamin C and they'll start actually eating healthy things. If not, what will happen is they'll just go straight for the biscuits, the lollies, the chips, and after a couple of days, it's amazing if people are snacking on kind of junk food and not getting good fresh food into them as well, how more lethargic they'll get and subsequently grumpy and so on. So make snacks really easy, but do mix it up with something a bit fun. Remember, just because you might be very keen on very healthy food, not everyone is, and it's important to know what everyone on board is going to want. But the next thing is hydration and water. These days, fortunately, looking after the ocean, we've stopped just piling on tons of plastic water bottles, or I hope so. But even with your reusable bottles, you should set a target. So look, each watch we want to finish one of these water bottles, or maybe if you believe in the benefits of them, which I do, you might want to look at things like hydrolytes or things that can just help top up the electrolytes for people, because when you spend a lot of time in wet weather gear, it's amazing how much you sweat. And I certainly found recommending and providing hydrolytes on board for longer trips can really help people out. Now, the next thing is your preparation. If you can pre-cook certain meals, maybe put them into Ziploc bags and have them so you lay them flat in the freezer so they stack really well when you bring them on board. That can make life quite straightforward. But the preparation isn't just the pre-cooking, it's actually just thinking about how am I going to manage this on the boat. So, for example, I'm unfortunately, touch wood, I've never seen the injury of this, but the amount of times I've watched people chopping tomatoes in like crazy conditions, bashing to windward, and you just think like, oh my goodness, do we really need this? Is there an alternative way we could do something? I've often found stuff you can just grab, can be buying things like Rocket, and you just grab a bag, chuck it into a wrap. How are we going to serve it? A wrap? Well, we could just wrap it maybe in a paper bag or something so that we don't have plastic, and also we minimize the washing up. But preparation is key. That also comes into knowing where things are. If you've got tins, for example, writing the name with permanent marker on the top of the tin, that will still come off, but it will take longer to come off than the label. Little game for you though, if you do lose all the labels. My wife used to run square riggers, and she ran the kitchen on square riggers for a number of years, and they used to just do lucky tin night where they just got 10 tins out for the crew and had to make a meal out of whatever you had. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend mixing anchovies and semolina, but tins can be great on board, but it's just a little game for you. Food that you can keep out of the fridge is fantastic, as long as you've actually got somewhere to put it. Look, it really depends. Some of the boats we sail on have, they've got an incredible amount of refrigeration space. Some it's very limited, but getting an understanding of what's gonna last, and generally you're having to monitor that constantly while you're at sea. So be flexible about your menu plan. That will feed in again to keep it simple. So yeah, you don't want to do the same thing every day. My good friend Andy and I, when we did a Fastnet campaign a few years ago, he said, "Yeah, don't worry, mate, I've got the food sorted." And we had nothing but the same freeze-dried meal with these little oat bars for days, and I still can't eat those things. No, the freeze-dried meals are alright, but the oat bars, you keep it simple, but put a bit of variety when you're doing a watch system for days on end. Other than the glorious sunsets and the sail changes and the dolphins and the fantastic conversation, there's not a lot to break it up. So if you can, sort of, the food often will become a hot topic of conversation. So try and keep it simple, but keep it interesting. Have a few surprises. My good friend Dane hid a packet of my favourite biscuits on board for me to find halfway across the Atlantic, and he very nearly got a smooch on the face for that one. Now, finally, just remember to be a little bit adventurous. So when I say a little bit adventurous, just if you've never cooked on board, start there. If you have cooked on board but you haven't cooked at sea, have a go at that. If you've only reheated but you haven't made a meal, just push yourself a little bit further all the time. But just be cautious of managing your seasickness. Often the change of temperature can onset seasickness for people, so please make sure you're thinking that one through in terms of delayering. Probably still looking after having your wet weather pants on to protect you from burns. But in terms of safety, when you're doing that, then just make sure that if people are starting to feel seasickness, that there's someone else that knows to now watch the stove if you've suddenly had to nip off and sort yourself out. So, but be adventurous, but just set up a bit of safety around it to make sure that you don't bite off too much more than you can chew, or leave an unattended stove or something like that might be a bit disastrous. But look, have fun with it. It's a highly neglected area of developing your skippering skills, and if you can run a well-run boat with excellent food, then you'll never be short of crew.